Rasheda's vision was suddenly hit with bright, warm sunlight. She squinted for a moment as she tried to get her bearings. The dense, seemingly endless maze of leaves and vines they had been trudging through had opened up into a clearing. A large stone structure stood silently in its center. "Right," Grognak grunted, drips of sweat streaking across his blue-gray forehead. "Looks like this is the place." Canthiel glanced back and forth between the structure and a notebook, his index finger quickly tracing its way across the lines of text as he mumbled to himself. "Medium-sized stone edifice, above-ground structure belies size of subterranean construction, forward sight around the perimeter." He paused, gesturing at a few tents and canopies that had been erected around the structure. "I dare say that our fearless leader is correct." Canthiel flashed the half-orc a triumphant smile. Grognak responded with a grunt. "Our instructions were to find the dig team. There's not a soul in this camp," Rasheda said, as she scanned the tents. "It doesn't look like anybody's been here for days." "We must remember that these are archaeologists and researchers," Canthiel replied, carefully closing the notebook. "Gods know they can be prone to bury themselves in their work. Hopefully not too literally in this case." Brunwyn snorted. "Aye, let's hope they haven't ruined anything while they've been down there." Rasheda sighed. A dwarf and an elf bonding over stone humor. Surely some bard somewhere had written better material than this. "At any rate, our hapless scholars are sure to be found inside this temple. I imagine they're poring over their field notes or pondering the riddles of the ages as they munch on their hardtack," Canthiel said, as he began walking towards the looming structure. "For the life of me, I'll never figure out how they let Jolthane on this expedition." "Friend of yours?" Grognak asked, raising a bushy eyebrow. "Yes, an old colleague from the academy. It's been decades since I've seen that fastidious fellow. And here I thought he'd spend the rest of his days surrounded by dusty tomes and carefully catalogued scrolls," Canthiel chuckled. "Hey now, Ken, you're a bit of a bookworm yourself," Brunwyn said, poking a playful elbow into his side. "Yes," Canthiel replied, with a slight grimace. Though they'd been magically mended, Rasheda could tell that his ribs were still sore from getting squeezed by that massive tentacle. If Grognak hadn't charged that huge creature and hacked Canthiel out of its grasp, the elf would have had more to worry about than just a few broken ribs. Canthiel's voice roused Rasheda from her thoughts. "But I always saw the value of field research. Libraries and laboratories can only tell us so much about the world. Some of the best data can only be gathered by grabbing it. Or being grabbed by it." "The only thing I want to grab is lunch, so let's find these quill pinchers and be done with it," Grognak said, as he began descending the stairs with Canthiel and Brunwyn following a few paces behind him. "Make sure you watch out for—" "Yes, the traps. I learned me lesson last time." Rasheda sighed again, pausing as she caught something out of the corner of her eye. Something was engraved into the stones of the outside wall. A picture of a maze, to be precise. Her eyes narrowed. Upteo. Rasheda could hear her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "If you are in the jungle and you see a maze, Mtoto, you solve it. End of story. If you don't, Upteo will curse you with a year of bad luck." Rasheda paused. This is silly. Upteo abandoned this land a century ago, she thought to herself. She looked at the maze again. It almost seemed as if it was staring at her, waiting impatiently to be solved. Rasheda let out a short huff, then walked over and traced her way through the maze with her finger. "There. Keep your bad luck to yourself," she snapped, then made her way after her companions. The stone stairs went downwards for a bit before leveling out into a long stone tunnel. Rasheda blinked as she walked, her eyes trying to adjust to the quickly fading light. "Everything all right back there, Shed?" Brunwyn called. "Fine, thanks. Just thought I saw something outside. Turned out to be nothing." Toward the end of the tunnel, the group could see what looked like torchlight flickering on the wall. "See? I told you they'd be inside," Canthiel said. It was too dark for Rasheda to see clearly, but she was sure he had that self-assured smirk on his face. Polite though he was, Canthiel couldn't help but exhibit some of his elven haughtiness when he was right about something. As they drew closer, Rasheda could see a few small canvas canopies, illuminated by the light. "Hold on," Grognak said, holding up a hand. "Those aren't torches." Continual flame spells, Kenthio laughed. Dolphane always was a competent spellweaver, even if he only used his spells for study. Winnie, what are you doing, Moina? Brunwyn was moving around the room, lighting the spent torches that were not lit with magic. Rasheda took one from a sconce and ran her fingers over it. It had been out for some time. What's it look like I'm doing? There's too dark in here for us. I mean, for Shed. She needs to be able to look for clues. Rasheda knew that couldn't be the only reason Winnie was lighting the torches, but she appreciated the light nonetheless. Rasheda carefully scanned the room, taking detailed note of the makeshift studies constructed under the canopies. Large ornate trunks acted as tables, on which piles of scrolls, writing utensils, and half-eaten rations were scattered across. Rasheda noticed one scroll held open by an ink bottle, marked with a meticulous drawing of a stone statue. A note next to it read, "New?" While she puzzled over this note, Rasheda focused her attention on the rest of the room. Her eyes darted over to Grognak as he let out a whistle.
Well, well, well. Looks like those parchment scratchers found something after all. How much you think this'll fetch? I hear the merchant princes pay extra for fine detail.
He grinned as he pointed to a statue under one of the canopies. As she got closer, Rasheda could see that it depicted a kneeling figure, its hands outstretched. No, wait. Was it shielding its face? The figure's eyes were closed, its palm tilted downwards, as if looking away from an imaginary foe. Its mouth was open, its face locked in an eternal, silent scream. It's certainly detailed, but this seems a bit grotesque. Much of the older Chultan stoneworks are more symbolic than they are literal. Something feels off. She looked to the doorway, which opened to the darkness beyond. We have to go deeper. As they made their way into the next room, Rasheda could make out in the dim light cast by the torches behind them that this chamber was circular. The only doorway she could see was the one they were currently walking through. As Rasheda crossed the threshold behind her companions, she felt the floor under her feet lower ever so slightly. An audible click met her ears. The doorway quickly shut, a wall of stone snuffing out the light from the hallway. Rasheda blinked, trying to force her eyes to adjust.
Everyone's still in one piece,
Grognak asked. Rasheda and the others mumbled in confirmation. Suddenly, a hole opened in the ceiling, shining a ray of sunlight into the center of the room. Inside of the beam of light, a small dais rose up from the floor. On its top was a small maze. Standing next to the dais, illuminated by this new light source, was another statue. Its hand stretched out towards the adventurers, holding a piece of parchment. "Oh, that thing gave me a start!" Brunwyn cried, her hand clamped to her chest. "Seems those colleagues of yours are fond of playing a cruel trick or two." "I'm beginning to think," Kenfield breathed, as he carefully approached the stone figure, "that these might not be newer constructions." He slowly inched the parchment out of the statue's hand, crept over to the dais, and held it under the light. Kenfield let out a loud gasp. "This bears the watermark of the Archaeological Society. These statues," he said, turning to his companions, "are the researchers." Brunwyn's eyes went wide as her normally ruddy complexion turned pale. Grognak sighed loudly as he scratched the back of his head.
Always the curious types, digging until they find trouble.
Oh, yes. Poor fellow, Rasheda murmured as she walked over to the dais. "Kenfield, is there anything written on that note about this maze?" The elf inhaled deeply, steadying himself as he read. "The ink is a bit smudged, but I can make out cup leads to shrine. The rest seems to just be scrollings." Rasheda peered at the note. Though she couldn't read it, the curving lines of elvish script were easily recognizable. She could see separate drawings of what seemed to be a group of trees and a waterfall, each surrounded by clusters of scratched-out words. Rasheda turned her attention back to the miniature maze. "Trees," she said, pointing to a symbol on one of the small stone walls. "Waterfall. Cup." She gestured towards a depiction of a golden goblet.
Fancy,
Grognak said.
So how's it open?
Rasheda looked at the middle of the maze. In its center was a polished jade knob, embellished with a motif of a reptilian footprint. The great lizards, she thought. Upteo's children. The side of Rasheda's mouth turned up into a small grin. If you are in the jungle and you see a maze, she said, guiding the knob through the miniature walls, you solve it. As the knob slid into place in front of the wall emblazoned with the goblet symbol, it lowered slightly with a small click. The room filled with the sounds of ancient machinery groaning to life as the wall behind them shuddered and began to raise. Door opened, Rasheda said, with a satisfied smirk. If Dulthane is alive, we must save him, Kenthiel said, peering into the inky blackness of the room in front of them. Rasheda felt Brunwyn's iron-like grip on her forearm. You okay, Brunwyn? I know seeing your first petrified person can be a bit jarring. Me? Oh, I'm as cool as a limestone bed. Just wanting to make sure you had a pair of eyes to help you through the dark, you being a human and all. Rasheda pulled a pair of owl-eyed goggles from her satchel. But I have these. Well, nothing wrong with a little emotional support, Brunwyn replied, with a forced laugh. Is the support for me or for you? Rasheda wondered, as she fastened the goggles around her head. The next room was musty and still. Rasheda could feel the coolness of the stagnant air washing over her skin, giving her goosebumps. This would be a refreshing change from that sweltering jungle, under different circumstances, Kenthiel said, his pupils glowing in the darkness. Rasheda scanned the room as they walked forward, the goggles making her vision a mix of grays and light greens. As they walked in deeper, Rasheda started to see bits of stone along the floor. That's strange, Brunwyn mused. It doesn't look like any of the ceilings come apart.
Eyes forward,
Grognak said, pointing with an axe head. In front of the group was a statue. Like the others from before, its face was contorted into a silent scream. Unlike the others, this one was missing both arms and had a large chunk taken out of its torso. Behind it were a number of petrified figures, each in similar states of partial destruction. None of these are Dulthane, Kenthiel said, breathing a sigh of relief. But that breath soon caught in his throat when he spotted a crouched figure in a corner, away from the group. Hold on, Kenthiel. We don't know what else is in here. Before Rasheda could finish, the elf was running towards the corner. There he found that the statue was a crouching, bespectacled elf. You quick-witted fool. No hiding place was going to save you this time, Kenthiel said, as he gently touched the figure's cheek. He reached into his side pouch and produced a piece of golden wire bent into the shape of a goblet. Kenthiel's voice echoed as he tugged at threads of the weave, pointing the wire towards Dulthane's petrified body. Silently, it lifted up from the floor and hovered in the air. Right, let's get Dulthane back to the main hallway. Then we can find out what did this to... The elf was interrupted by the sound of a loud crunch, followed by the clank of iron on stone. Everyone turned to see where the sounds were coming from. Looking straight at them through the darkness was a pair of glowing red eyes that came closer with each echoing step. Entering the range of Rasheda's goggles was a large bull-like creature that seemed to be made entirely out of some kind of black metal. It appeared to be chewing on something, as bits of stone and dust fell from the corners of its mouth. The creature let out a low, echoing bray. Thought you could sneak up on us, huh? Rasheda said, pulling an arrow back in her bow. You're not the only one that can hunt in the dark. The arrow whizzed towards the creature, deflecting off of one of its shoulder plates. That hide's too thick! Hit it with something else, Shed! Brunwyn yelled, readying her war pick. Rasheda drew in a breath, focusing on her target. A lavender glow emanated from her chest as she pulled back her bowstring. It traveled through her arm and into the arrow, turning it into a shimmering bolt of energy. Rasheda exhaled. The creature bellowed as its chest was blasted with a flash of light.
Now that got its attention,
Grognak said, baring his tusks with a grin. The iron bull galloped forward, charging in Rasheda's direction. Grognak roared, sprinting with axes raised towards the metal beast. The bull proved to be faster. It rammed its horns into the center of the half-orc's body, sending him flying backwards. Grognak landed hard on the stone floor, blood sputtering from his lips. The metal bull reared back and pounded into Grognak's chest with its iron hooves. Rasheda winced as she heard the sound of cracking bones, loosing 2 more arrows at the creature. It staggered backwards as each of its shoulders was hit with a burst of light. "Hang in there, Grognak!" Brunwyn yelled, running to the half-orc's motionless body. She placed a palm against Grognak's chest, frantically offering a prayer to Muradin. His wounds seared with red light as the flesh fused back together. Grognak coughed, arching his back.
Maybe,
He paused to draw a ragged breath.
that was a bad idea.
"This one might be worse. Brace yourself," Brunwyn said, as she grabbed Grognak's shoulders and threw him sliding across the floor. She looked up to see the iron bull standing right in front of her. A blast of green gas shot from its nostrils, enveloping her sturdy frame. Brunwyn clamped a gloved hand over her nose and mouth. A muffled scream escaped her lips as she looked down. From the soles of her boots up to her knees, Brunwyn was rapidly turning to stone. "Concentrate, Winnie! Try to resist the effects of the magic!" Kenthiel called, as he continued to float his petrified colleague towards the previous room. "I'll blast that thing apart once Dulthane is safe!" Brunwyn closed her eyes, firmly grasping the symbol around her neck. A shower of sparks enveloped the dwarf, cascading from the top of her head down to the floor. The effect lasted a few moments before dissipating. The stone sections of Brunwyn's legs were back to normal. "Muradin has blessed us this day," she said, with a smile. Grognak rose to his feet and slammed a fist into his cuirass. A symbol inscribed into its center began to glow with white light. The same light began to glow in the half-orc's eyes and course through his veins. His muscled arms flexed with new strength.
I'll hold that monstrosity in place while you 2 give it hell. As soon as the elf gives the signal, fall back to the door.
Brunwyn nodded as she ran from the beast. The metallic bull was hit with 2 more blasts of lavender light. Enraged, it charged again at the half-orc.
I'm ready for you this time, bastard!
Grognak yelled, grabbing the bull by its horns. He braced himself as the creature tried to break free of his grip, shaking its massive head back and forth. "Rasheda! Ready the door!" Kenthiel's voice called. Rasheda sprinted to the door to get to the maze. Grognak started slowly sliding backwards as the monstrous bull struggled and pushed. He bashed his knee into its face.
Can't hold this thing much longer,
He groaned. "Wait a moment. Now!" Kenthiel yelled. Grognak slammed the creature to the ground, then bounded towards the door with Brunwyn sprinting close behind. Kenthiel's voice boomed through the chamber as the air behind them began to shimmer and then erupt with a thunderous, deafening sound. Rasheda's hands went to her ears as she watched the half-orc and dwarf crash through the doorway, propelled by the blast. The room shook as stones in the ceiling began to crack and shake. At the dais, Rasheda quickly moved the jade knob to the symbol of the waterfall. She gasped, leaping backwards as a chunk of stone fell onto the maze, smashing half of it. The door behind them groaned shut as a new doorway opened.
What the hell was that?
Grognak yelled, holding a large palm to his ear. "A spell that should put that monster out of commission permanently," Kenthiel replied. "Although I may have accidentally done some, collateral damage." Rasheda glared at the elf, who met her gaze with a sheepish grin. "At any rate, it looks like now we only have one way out. We should take it." The hallway opened up into a large open-air garden surrounded by high walls on all sides. A large fountain stood in its center, a small waterfall gushing down from its top. The air was humid and filled with a strong, sweet scent of flowers. "Well, at least the scenery is pleasant out here. We should take a moment to refresh, then send word to our contact in Port 9 Zaru," Kenthiel said, pulling a piece of copper wire from his pouch. Rashada wrinkled her nose. There was something off about the smell. It had an almost sickly, musky air to it. Her eyes went wide. "Don't touch any of the flowers," she cried, just as Bronwyn was leaning in to smell a group of what looked like large, yellow orchids. The center flower sprayed her with a burst of thick, purple pollen. The dwarf reeled back, retching as blood started running from her eyes and nose.
"Uterus as pestilent boils, what now?"
Grognak growled. Humanoid figures began rising out of the thick flower beds. Vines and roots crisscrossed their bodies, each one growing a yellow flower out of the side of its head. Rashada inhaled and took aim with her bow. As her first arrow found its target, she had a thought that made her smirk. Well, at least we didn't have any bad luck.
Thanks for joining us on Browsing the Bestiary. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes and check out our Patreon at Browsing the Bestiary, all one word.
There you can keep up to date on any new pod-related announcements, access reference pages for each episode, and download character sheets for characters featured in our story times. You can also comment on what you think the next monster will be, and if you get it right, you'll get inspiration.
And if you're something of a lore master yourself, you can offer us corrections for any facts we got wrong. If you catch something we missed, you may get a shout out in a future episode.
Remember to cite your sources.
I'm Dungeon Mistress Jade.
And I'm Lore Master Andy.
Until next time, may your dice rolls be high
and your adventurers ever prepared.